Hi, I'm Erica Chesla, and this is my social problems research paper and presentation. For my social issue, I chose to research eating disorders in society today. So, for this paper, I will be taking a look at the place that eating disorder has in society, and I will research what influences eating disorders and the cultural impact that social media and cultural beliefs about being thin have had. And I'll also take a look at what is currently being done to prevent more eating disorders developing. So when I was in high school, I used to think that eating disorders were something that didn't really affect anyone, that it was something more that you see in movies or on television. Because I didn't know anyone, none of my friends had an eating disorder. No one in my family, no one that I knew had one, so I thought it was a much smaller problem and that people were just making it out to be much bigger than it actually was. And a few years ago, I found out that my younger stepsister was dealing with anorexia and had been for years. And I saw how much of an impact this eating disorder had on her life and the control that it had over her and how her life was no longer her own. But she was living her life at the whim of her disorder. And I began to research it more, and I realized how prevalent this issue still is in society. And my heart has gone out to the boys and girls who are suffering with eating disorders and have fallen victim even to death to these. So eating disorders have become more prevalent in Western countries in recent decades, and it is estimated that nearly 30 million people in America, regardless of their age or gender, are affected by an eating disorder. 20 million of that 30 million are females, while 10 million are males. So about 1 in every 200 American females will battle with anorexia at some point in her lifetime, while a whole 3 out of every 100 American females will have to deal with bulimia at some point in their life. Out of any mental illness, eating disorders have the highest mortality rate, and someone dies as a direct result of an eating disorder every 62 seconds in the United States. So with the increase of eating disorders in America in the past decades, it would be important to evaluate where this rise is coming from. And then once we find what the root of this is, we will be able to take steps towards preventing more eating disorders developing. So research has found that many social factors can contribute to eating disorders. There are cultural pressures that glorify thinness. And in society today, we value people more based on their physical appearance and their looks, rather than looking inward and looking at their strengths and qualities and personality traits. And these pressures to be pretty rather than be a good person and have a good heart, they affect many people regardless of their race, their socioeconomic class, their age, their sex, or their sexual orientation. So although there is no single cause of dissatisfaction with one's body or improperly eating, research has made it clear that the media does add to this pressure. And although eating disorders are encouraged by the media, maybe not directly but indirectly, and fashion and diet, eating disorders can also come about as a coping mechanism that people may develop in response to a trauma. These traumas could include sexual abuse, poverty, or homophobia or racism, all which are something that come from society and are social issues. And still, other people may develop eating disorders for other reasons outside of media influences, such as controlling their food intake if they believe that their eating habits are the one thing that they can control in their unmanageable lives. So mainstream advertisements are one thing that can lead and pressure girls into having eating disorders. because many advertisements share the same theme. In order to be pretty, you should be thin. Advertisements and eating disorders have been linked together for over 30 years now, and there has been a rise in advertisements and eating disorders over the last 3 decades. So in 1970, the average age that a girl would begin dieting was age 14, but 20 years later, in 1990, the average age dropped to only 8. And the ideal body image for girls comes from advertising, because advertisements, they portray images of skinny, light-skinned white girls, and that causes the girls viewing these advertisements to want the models' bodies. And commercials imply to females that if they lose the weight or if they apply makeup, they can be happy with themselves. So one study that I found reports that at age 13, 53% of girls find dissatisfaction with their body, but by the time they get to 17, 78% of them will be dissatisfied with the way that they look. So although cultural influences from peers and media place a good importance on body image and can play a part in the development of eating disorders, biological factors can also come into play when it comes to a risk for eating disorders. Not all people with eating disorders have been negatively affected by the media, and the media probably isn't the sole reason for eating disorders for anyone, but it is a contributing factor. The other factors that can contribute to eating disorders are neurobiological and genetics, social and cultural, and behavioral and psychological factors such as personality traits. So there have been studies that show that we today in 2019 are exposed to 4,000 to 10,000 advertisements per day. And all these advertisements are on TV, they're on billboards that we drive by, and many of them are on our phones or on social media platforms. And adolescents spend 4+ hours in front of a screen daily. And when they see these advertisements on television, on their phones, on their YouTube videos, half of the ads are aimed at women, and they speak about physical attractiveness. So study after study show that these ads that are talking to women about being more attractive, they're contributing towards women developing a negative body image. So if we take those statistics into consideration, we can see how society has influenced us regarding our body shape and size. While a majority of media contains unrealistic body standards, because the average woman today in 2019 is about 5'4" and weighs 140 pounds, while the models that are being shown in advertisements are 5'11" and weigh only 117 pounds. And research has shown that models are skinnier than 98% of women in America today. And another really big contributing factor to eating disorders, especially in 2019, could be social media, because around 88% of all teenagers have social media accounts. And when I say social media, I'm including things such as Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. So this means that a vast majority of adolescents are exposed to messages of body size and shape. There was a study conducted that found that the more time that teenage girls spent using social media platforms, the higher their chances for a negative body image and developing an eating disorder were. And I can say that from my friends, I know the ones who spend more time on their phones, they're the ones who are constantly obsessed with how they look. And every time they look in the mirror, they have something negative to say, even if it's just in passing. The more time that they spend looking at other people's lives and at other girls' bodies, then they become more obsessed with becoming that for themselves. So some websites, such as Pinterest, have banned what is called Dinspiration, which is accounts or posts that are pro anorexia or pro bulimia or other eating disorders, and they encourage girls and gives them tips, and they give them tips and tricks and eating like plans and exercise routines or excuses to give when people ask, and they give them tips on how to continue down this road of an eating disorder. So the media influences people to develop a certain concept of appearance that many teenagers and young adults try to adapt to. So women in particular try to conform their bodies to norms and standards and end up striving and starving themselves for an unrealistic body shape, because many of the people that you see posting on Instagram or the women that are in the ads, they're photoshopped and they themselves don't even look like that. So over the decades, society's idea of beauty has changed a lot. And even today around the world, different cultures have different perceptions on what is considered beautiful. There's a tribe of women in Thailand who wear brass rings around their neck to elongate them, because in their culture, the longer your neck, the more attractive you are. And in Kenya, there is a tribe where the women try to elongate their earlobes using stones. And so it's obvious that our idea of what a perfect body shape is affected by the socio-cultural influences that we see and are thrust upon us every day. So more than compared to 10 years ago, there's a lot more that is being done in order to normalize an average body. There have been many companies who have decided that they're not going to use Photoshop on their models anymore, and they're not going to retouch their advertisements. So today when you go to a mall or when you go to Target, you can see models in their swimsuits who have stretch marks and who have cellulite, and they have more people are becoming part of the body positive movement, and they're posting pictures of themselves as they are without any retouching. And they're showing the rolls on their stomach, or that their pores aren't invisible. And so things like this, girls seeing that there are other girls out there who look like them, they're able to say, there's someone who looks like me and I think she's beautiful, and I don't have to change the way I look because of that. And there are also more plus size models than there ever have been. And so they're making their way onto the scene, and companies are now including people who aren't just size 00 into their campaigns. Personally, I think that the best plan would be to educate and help youth find their worth in God and not in something as fleeting as beauty. First Peter tells us that your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's eyes. And Proverbs also says that charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I know that you can't reach God to everyone and save them through them finding Christ, because a lot of people who suffer with these, they're not going to go to church to fix their eating disorder. So I think that other companies not using Photoshop and them seeing more girls like themselves in the media is a more realistic way to prevent more eating disorders from developing. So my hope would be that moving forward, even more companies would decide to let their models be unretouched, because it is dangerous for girls to believe that the only way they can be beautiful is by looking like the girl who they see modeling, whose real waist isn't that small either as they make it look in the advertisement. And so while I think it is important that society does not promote unhealthy lifestyles such as anorexia or, on the other side of the scale, obesity, it is important to see average people instead of thinner people all the time. And my hope would be that girls who want to be thin or are unhappy with their body would develop realistic standards for themselves and understand what they're able to accomplish and make healthy lifestyle choices in order to get where they want to be.